Welcome to the 3:30 session. This computer says 2:30. It is older version of Windows here. This session is what are GIS employers looking for? We've assembled quite the panel here to talk to you guys about what the current GIS market is, and we have some pre-canned questions that we're going to run through for the first part, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions. So I'll bounce around with a mic. If you have questions that aren't answered in the first part, feel free to ask them at that time. So I'm quickly just going to go down the row here and tell you who we've got, and then I'm going to allow them to expand on who they are, what organization they work for, if they're public or private, the structure of the organization, the number of employees, that type of deal, to give you some context of what kind of answers you're getting. We have Kent Rothrock with Highland Mapping. We have Joseph Sloop next to him with Maps Forsyth. And then we have Teresa Townsend with Planning Communities. And then Mike Dyer at the end with Esri. So Kent, why don't you give us a little bit of information about yourself?
I'm used to normally starting to sing with some background music with a microphone, so this is sort of dangerous. You know, Garrett. So, I am the owner of Highland Mapping. A lot of folks here may know me. It's sort of funny. This is my 20th year at this conference, my 11th NCGIS. So it's hard to believe it's been that long. But we're a small company. There's 5 full-time employees. We have been around a good while now, so I think I've got a little perspective. I haven't hired a ton of employees. I've been very fortunate with retention over the years. I think some of that's luck. Some of that is being careful when we hire. I have had a lot of experience hiring interns, so I can address that as well. We are a private business that works and primarily consults with government, and I was formerly, in a former life, a government employee. So again, currently 5 employees, and I guess we'll expand on that. I'm the owner and senior project manager. I do some programming. I've got a crack programmer who I've done work with for 20 years that I went to grad school with. He's awesome, and I lean on him heavily. I've got a right-hand man who's really, I call him a GIS specialist, but we do so many different kind of things that it's hard to categorize. But he is sort of my right-hand man with database installations and project management and things like that. I maybe call him a junior project manager, but he has a lot of technical chops too. And then I've got a technician that's been with me actually the longest at this point, and he's great and just as valuable. And then I've got a business manager. And, you know, we may be expanding, so this is sort of a fortuitous topic to be talking about.
Joseph Sloop with Map Forsyth. We're an enterprise GIS department, so we serve multiple folks. We're public sector, so my funding comes from the city of Winston and Forsyth County, but we have interlocal agreements with all the municipalities in the county. So we mainly do GIS work, but we also do all the addressing work here in the county except for one municipality. So we have a staff of 7. We have myself, I'm the Geographic Information Officer. Then I have a GIS coordinator who supervises 2 GIS analysts. I have an addressing coordinator and an addressing analyst. But we're public sector, and so it's kind of interesting. I just was doing interviews last week, actually, so it's pretty fresh on my mind. So.
Hi, I'm Teresa Townsend with Planning Communities. The first question I want to ask, I'm going to get right into interactive here. Does your employer know you're in here? Anyone? No, I'm just kidding. And then I just had a question that might help guide some input later, particularly maybe from Kent and I. Is anyone in here thinking about starting their own business? Or has their own business? Okay. All right. Nobody's going to admit to that, other than those who... Yeah, Tripp's here to harass me, so he's standing up here. So a little bit about Planning Communities. I'm a women-owned firm, been in business for about 12 years now, planning and GIS multidisciplinary firm, and I'll go into the details when we start talking as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Dyer, and I am the Southeast Regional Manager for Esri out of Charlotte. Esri globally has upwards of 5,000 employees. I don't know exactly what the number is, and it seems like it floats around a lot. I never can get a straight answer on that. But we're headquartered in Redlands, California. We have 9 regional offices around the U.S. and some international offices, as well as a network of international distributors. But representing the Charlotte office, so we have about 200 employees in Charlotte now, which is rather astonishing because some of you know me for a long time. This is my 25th year at Esri, and when I started, I think I was the 12th person in the office, and now we're pressing over 200. So in the Charlotte office, we have the bulk of that number comes from our East Coast Technical Support Center, which is headquartered in Charlotte. We also have, and that's an operation that is consistently hiring and continues to grow. And we continue to build that team up over our tech support in Redlands. But I represent the business development side of the house. I can certainly answer any questions you might have about tech support, but I also represent our business development side of the house. So we hire GIS professionals as account managers, as solution engineers. So we have account managers, solution engineers, we have support analysts, we have a large services group in Charlotte as well. So we have trainers. We have some development resources in Charlotte as well.
Great. Thanks, guys. So we'll jump right into the questions. So the first question is, what level of education would you consider necessary for an entry-level GIS job?
Okay. Well, I have the mic, so I'll answer that. So, for Esri, we do require a bachelor's degree, but a master's is preferred, but it's not required.
We do hire interns that are working towards their bachelor's degree, but for the most part, we're looking at a master's degree as well.
Most of ours are bachelor degrees. Sometimes different departments, so we don't do tax mapping, things like that. So there are other GIS folks in these 2 organizations. Some of those will look at 2-year degrees and things, just depending on the job. But I know in our department, we start at the analyst level and go up, so we require a bachelor's degree.
It's really a tricky question. So one cool thing about owning your own business is you get to hire whoever you want. And to be honest, I've known some really smart people with bachelor's degrees and without bachelor's degrees, like my parents. And I've known some really dumb people with PhDs. So for me, it's more about, again, being a small business, you have a little more latitude. I tend to hire, the last person I hired had a master's and was actually about halfway through to a PhD before he stopped that path. You can be choosy. So like the last time I hired, I put it out on the local North Carolina listserv. I put it out on locally in Boone and around where I live because of Appalachian State. And I ran it on GIS Jobs Clearinghouse, which is a great way because it's cheap and it gets broad reach. And I had probably 80 resumes. And I had PhDs. I had people that own their own businesses applying for my GIS specialist job that Brandon has now. So it's funny when you're hiring for a finite position because the first thing you have to do is figure out how to toss a lot of them out. And that can be pretty easy, and to be honest, like I threw the PhDs out. I threw the people that own their own business out. And the reason I do it, I'm thinking about, again, it's all unique. Everybody's in a unique situation. As a small business owner, I don't want anybody to come in that probably has owned their own business because they're going to try to tell me how to run my business. So you got to sort of watch that. So there's a lot about personalities. PhDs, again, a little much for what I was needing. I was needing sort of a project manager, technical person, implementer. And it just, to me, somebody who spent that much time in academia. And again, I've known a lot of, professors, and I've got a master's degree myself from many years ago. I was a little scared off from that. So for me, it's probably a master's or a bachelor's, and it all sort of depends. Because what I'm looking for as a small business based in the mountains is somebody to stay. That's my number one thing, is somebody that can join my team, that can grow into the position. They don't have to be, brilliant right off the bat, but I'm looking for retention, because as a small business, turnover is going to cost me a ton of money and a ton of time. So it's really sort of a loaded question.
All right. Assuming that applicants have GIS education and skills, do you tend to hire individuals with geography degrees or degrees in applied disciplines such as geomatics, planning, landscape architecture, environmental science?
So again, you guys already probably have a good idea. With mine, I'm going to, everybody in my office that has my technical staff, which there's only 4 of us, but we're all geography majors or masters from Appalachian State. So I'm very picky there. Just kidding. I would hire people from other schools. But again, part of that is they like living there, although my programmer actually doesn't live in the mountains. Geography and GIS or database administration sort of fits for my business, because a lot of what I'm doing is enterprise level stuff. But I think nowadays, again, it all depends. It'll probably be different for these guys. We do a lot of tech support, a lot of techie stuff. So it doesn't matter if they necessarily had a geography degree. It's more, do they have the aptitude for technical work, the attention to detail? Do they like it? Do they want to do that sort of stuff? Because you'll find lots of people that just, they don't want to get that far in the weeds. And so it all just depends. But by and large, I've hired geography folks.
So I agree with a lot of what Kent said. I mean, even where I'm at in the public sector, the majority of the resumes that I get in are usually geography and or planning degrees that come in. Currently, though, I mean, the background we have with the folks in place now in Map Forsyth, we have geography, planning, and IT degrees. And here again, it depends on the position. If I'm looking for a program or something, I'm okay with somebody having a stronger IT background, because they're probably going to have tons and tons of IT and programming skills. So, but the majority of the folks and even the applications that come through and I look at them, most of them are within geography planning realm.
Mine is a kind of mix between both of these guys, but I would say for an urban planning firm, and we're really looking at multidisciplinary. So our backgrounds are varied all over the place. So most have at least a bachelor's in geography, but many of them have degrees in economics, and land use, or in urban planning, landscape architecture, you name it, archaeology. A lot of different disciplines. I even have business degrees and such. For those who have master's degrees in something other than geography, most have at least a GIS certificate on top of that. So all of our employees use GIS, but to varying degrees. And then we have GIS analysts as well.
Yeah, people come to the GIS profession from a lot of different backgrounds. My most recent solution engineer that I hired was actually a theater major and worked on Broadway for a number of years. But when the theater industry kind of dried up during the Great Recession, she found herself working at FEMA and became a planner and got exposed to GIS that way, and then spent 10 years doing GIS work at FEMA. So yeah, we have, most of our people come to us with geography or GIS specific background or planning background or environmental science or computer science IT background, but yeah, we definitely have all walks of life. I've got people that are biologists by education, but just got exposed to GIS through that curriculum and developed a passion for the technology that way.
How do you determine if a candidate is qualified?
Yeah, so there's a number of factors, and I'll speak specifically to the business development side of Esri because that's what I know the most. But for us, I think it's sort of a three-legged stool. So obviously, there's the technical expertise. They have a solid foundation in GIS technology. The second leg of that stool is, and for me working in the government space, you've got to have, either a background in state or local government or, an understanding of state or local government, a passion to work in this industry. I mean, I've stayed at Esri as long as I have because, I love working with state and local government. I'm just very passionate about, the way cities work. And, it's always been a passion of mine. And, I'd started going down the path of being a city manager and then got derailed somewhere along the way. But we're looking for people that have that same passion that really want to work in the government sector. So, in our role, we have to be very broad in our knowledge. I mean, our folks need to be able to go in and meet with a public works department and understand what they do and, on a day-to-day basis, and need to be able to give them a vision for how GIS can support their day-to-day work. We need to understand what a police department does, what a fire department does, what a planning department does. So, we have to be very broad in our knowledge base of government. And then on the business development side, obviously the third leg of the stool is, we need people that have that business acumen, those communication skills, both written skills and presentation skills to be able to engage, every different level within government, the GIS professionals, the IT leadership, departmental leadership, and, executive leadership. But I think I think at the end of the day, the people that really stand out are, the ones that really come at us with a real passion for the technology and a passion for working in this space. And then also the ability to problem solve is another real key.
So I'll add a little bit to that. When you're hiring or when you're looking for candidates, as far as determining if they're qualified, do you use any testing or specific technical questions during the process that you found that helps bring out if that person's the right candidate?
We do. We vet everybody that we interview pretty thoroughly. I mean, it varies, whether you're interviewing for a support analyst role versus interviewing for a solution engineer role on my team. But, we were certainly screening to, understand how well you know the ArcGIS platform. Do you know ArcGIS Enterprise? Do you know Pro, Online? Some of the specialty products that are, part of our platform. So yeah, we do have a screening process with senior technical resources within the office that help make that determination. Yep.
All right. To repeat the question, how do you determine if a candidate is qualified? You can't. And we have found that, especially in small business, we have had folks that show up that you think are absolutely the most qualified people in the entire world, and they can't write a report or do anything related to the data that they're working on. So I think that one of the things that we look at, in addition to just general qualifications, we're really interested in more, as Mike was saying, in that passion and drive. There's a lot of things that we can teach and grow someone into a position. A lot of our folks start out as an intern. We're lucky to be within very, very close distance to NC State and to Carolina and others. And I won't mention everyone because I know everybody's very passionate about that as well. But we bring in a lot of interns, and it kind of helps us see, how they're developing. And the other thing that we also like to do is to hire folks and figure out what their interest is and develop specific service areas around their interest, because the folks that really feel like they're making a difference in doing great work, a lot of it is coming from their ideas that they're bringing to the table. And so there's many times I've added new service areas, and you have the luxury to do that whenever you have your own business, and you can kind of structure, kind of have things go the way they go. And the other way, I think, just in speaking about interns, just our relationships and networks, folks that you get to know in these settings. I mean, over the years, you kind of figure out who's in that same kind of mindset and how that works with your company or your organization. So this is a good opportunity, and this is what we use a lot to do that.
So ditto to all these comments. The passion part is very important, right? Technical stuff can be learned. You can train people on technical, but I can't train your personality. I can't get your passion up to that level. And being in local government, you know what? We have our challenges some days, and we have some really great days. And it's important that you do understand how local government functions. And the part that's put back on me as a department head is when we set up our interviews, I spend hours crafting the questions, knowing exactly what I'm looking for too. Okay, so I have a position XYZ open. Well, I want this, 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 and this, and I'll compromise on these qualities, and like that, right? My wish list and everything. And so I craft all my questions around that. And for example, I see some faces I've done interviews with before. One question I love asking is how do you explain GIS to a layperson, right? How do you explain GIS? Why? Because we work with a lot of folks who have no clue what we do. You'll hear it GSI, or it's the mapping folks and things like that. We do a lot more than that. And so I need people who can think quickly on their feet, right? Those 30-second elevator speeches, those kinds of things at all levels. Because we're a small department, and I have a lot of trust in all of my employees to be able to speak for Map Forsyth. So if you're there with the mayor, if you're there with whomever, I trust you to be able to speak and speak intelligently to them. So I really put a lot of time into crafting questions. We asked one time if we could do like a test, have them come in and say, okay, here's the problem, here's a computer, go do something, figure it out. HR said I could not do that because there's not a standardized, unless somebody knows of one, let me know, but because there's not a national test of some sort that we can give. So they were, fair enough, afraid of lawsuits and things like that. So we actually don't do that in any of our interviews. However, we do at times make people bring in portfolios. And here again, to throw in fun with that, right, is always ask for a black and white map, because those are just hard to make. And if you can do that, again, it's problem solving, right? How do I make a black and white map and make it good? When we have all this cool stuff, right, like A2L and all these other, I also ask for links to that. I want to see what they can do with that. So in place of that, I look at portfolios and things like that. So.
A lot of great answers there from these guys, and I'll just sort of build on that. First thing, as a business person, you're constantly trying to figure out new ways. So like just hearing their answers helps me out. like Joe's idea of the black and white map. It's brilliant. And then your comment about you as a small business, if you get some ringer in some field that you weren't even planning on that's happy to work for you, you might suddenly be able to take your business in another direction. If I can just get LeBron James to work for me, Highland Mapping may go in a slightly different direction. So that's really interesting. I do want to comment, just passion. Anybody that knows me knows I'm pretty outspoken. I don't do standardized tests. When I first got out of grad school, I applied for a job in Boone at this very reputable private firm that's very successful, and they gave me one of those BS tests, and apparently I didn't do well. And I think all these years later, and I've been, knock on wood, moderately successful as a business person, I'm like, how big did they screw that up? They could have had me, man, I'd be president of that company now. And they threw me out over some doofus test. So I do not believe in those things at all. So again, build on education, what it's worth, experience, what it's worth, technical chops. Communication skills is huge, not just with customers, but with your team members, and being able to communicate with me and communicate with the other team members. Being independent. Again, as a small business, I don't have time. I'm too busy doing sales and managing problems and dealing with the business end of things to be able to hold people's hands all the time. So I need people that can hit the ground running and solve their own problems. Responsibility. And again, problem solving, as Mike alluded to, ambition, wanting to work. Again, I've fired an intern before because he just didn't want to work. I mean, this dude wasn't ready for, he's getting out of college, and I guess he hadn't had to pay his own health insurance yet or anything. So he wasn't ready to show up and work. And I'm not even that anal about like hours. You can, work any, 45 hours a week you want, just show up. Again, personality and fit, super important, especially in a small office. And again, known commodity. So I'm sort of thinking about expanding now, and I'm sort of looking at maybe hiring a project manager. And a lot of it, I'm thinking about people I already know, again, that are at these conferences. I already know people that may be thinking about leaving, or maybe they're thought about private sector. And those are people that I'm looking at, because like from a project manager, you want somebody that's got some experience, right? I'm not going to get some kid right out of school and make them a project manager. I need somebody that understands. They don't even have to be that technical, but they got to understand how GIS projects work, how the big picture of the technology, what we're trying to accomplish. There's a lot of herding cats that can go on with project management. That's not meant as an insult to anybody. There's a lot of just lining things up so we can accomplish a goal. And then I'll finish with this. The way we hire, and again, I'm constantly trying to learn as a business person how to do this. I don't have an MBA. I'm not a human resources a person by training. But we'll do, figure out a way to throw out all but say 8 to 10 resumes, which isn't that hard. And I'll talk about that a little bit too. But then we'll do phone interviews first. And then we'll do some combination of written. Usually what I've done is phone, and then I'll whittle it down a little bit. And then if I got a group of, say, 8 people, and this is a good tip for you guys, and somebody in the public sector tipped me on to this, I give them essay questions. And basically I want written answers. And so, give them to them, hey, answer these 10 questions. And they vary from, not a lot of overly technical stuff. By this time, I know more or less they have some technical chops. But, I want to see how they write, because plenty of people can talk good, but can't, write a paragraph that makes any sense. And then also, a lot of times you'll get some really good detail there. And it'll give you a real window into somebody when you read what they've written. And they're sort of open-ended essay questions. And then we'll do in-person interviews. And then the other things I always do, again, I'm a small business. I'm not having to go through tons of this. This happens very rarely in my company at this point, is I'll email people if I didn't give them a phone interview, But if I give them, and I'll even email if I do a phone interview and I don't choose them. But if I interview somebody in person and then I don't choose them, I always call them and tell them in person that I'm not hired. Those are one of those things I feel like it's a sort of an integrity sort of deal where, I owe it to them. They've come to my office. They've poured their heart out in the interview process. They really want the job. And it can be tough. Last time when I hired Brandon, the guy that didn't get the job, he really wanted the job. And it was a difficult, but I felt like I owed it to him to call him in person and give him the news. So that's probably more than you wanted. But
No, now we all know how to get jobs at Highland.
there you go.
That's great.
You know the secret.
All right, so I'm about a third of the way to the questions, and we're halfway through our time allotment. So I'm going to ask these questions, and if you guys can, not a yes or no, but keep it condensed, and we'll see how far we can go before we turn it over to the audience. So is it not going? Now it's on me. Okay. How do you value course-based training versus learned on-the-job experience, and which one do you value more?
On the job.
A mix thereof.
On the job.
I would agree on the job. We can teach you a lot of the skills. I will say the value of, course-based training. So, if we're talking about, pursuing a degree, it's really important that, not only do we know how to run software, but what's really important is how to be a spatial thinker. How to be able to look at a problem, look at a challenge that an organization's facing, and being able to think through that spatially, what a solution could be. So there's value in a lot of the foundational training in courses, but definitely on the job.
Great. So this is going to be 2 slides here. What is your definition of a GIS professional? And then what do you consider to be the skills and traits of a GIS professional in today's world? And how has that changed from years past, say 10 years ago?
Okay. Well, I think that follows up what I just said really well. I think a GIS professional is more than somebody who knows how to operate GIS software. I mean, it really is about somebody that can see things spatially, can understand the world spatially, can understand how the technology can help to solve and address the challenges that the organization are dealing with. So that's just critical. I think the way the GIS profession has changed today versus 10 years ago is, I think today it's more about empowering others to be able to use the technology. I mean, the GIS professional has a unique skill set that they bring to the organization, and you're always going to be recognized as the one with that unique skill or that unique trade craft to be able to do spatial analysis and spatial thinking. But the industry has really gone to where the GIS professional is now really trying to enable others to operate more self-sufficiently.
I had previously written this question out, and it almost sounds like a rewrite of what you just said. But basically, I said that GIS professional is oriented in solutions and knowing that everything is connected to everything. It's not just, as we've mentioned before, the particular technical skills that you have. It's how you know how to apply that and communicate with others.
I think so when I talk about our department and people are like, well, why are you guys different than, say, tax mapping or some other group that uses GIS? It's because this is how we think. This is how we look at the world. When we put on the glasses, we put on the glasses of GIS, and that's how we view everything in our world. And I agree with the empowerment of users, because that's a big focus I know of Map Forsyth. We want, yes, we have guys who are very, very intelligent and specialized and do lots of really cool things. And the cool thing is that their passion to have other people kind of taste that, right? Get a taste of GIS and what it can do. And then all of a sudden that person goes off and starts using it. And especially when it's folks who have no background in GIS, and all of a sudden they're using GIS products and now they can't live without it.
So again, these guys have done a great job pretty much answering it. GIS people, and I don't want to make this sound trite, but we're data managers. That's what we generally are. We're all just managing data, and it just so happens our data it's extra spatial. So, but no, we can make maps. We can do spatial analysis. That's obviously a different level from just regular old tabular data, but we're data managers. But again, the ability to think spatially, as these guys said. But I do like what Mike said about, the paradigm really shifted. When I first got into business 20 some years ago now, it was all about the super GIS nerd in the office who could crank out all these maps and do all this cool stuff. And I think Mike nailed it in that now what we're doing is we're distributing all that know-how and especially the ability to manage your own data, analyze your own data, and so forth to the end users. And again, governments are a great example where it used to just have the GIS dude back in his cube who could do it all and did everything for everybody else. And now even places where I've worked a long time, slowly, I was just having a conversation with one of my clients for a small town down in the Triangle area that I've worked with, and he was telling me how it's just growing. Now he's got 7 or 8 people dabbling in their portal. And, when we first started working for him a few years ago, it was just him. And so it's slowly taken over. It's slowly growing to all those departments. And I think that's a lot of what we're doing.
Okay, so I think that's great. I'm going to jump ahead a couple because we've covered some of these. But that plays good into this question. Is the overall trend of the GIS industry moving towards programming, development, and IT experience or computer science? Or do you still see value in traditional GIS expertise like digitizing, data collection and conversion, cartography, desktop analysis?
I think there's still value in traditional expertise. Again, it's hard to see outside of my experience. Right when I started my career after graduate school in the mid to late 90s, the first job I had was I was a GIS coordinator in a small county in western North Carolina, and I actually had to digitize. I was doing the parcel mapping, and I would actually map on the Mylar, so I'm that old school, and then I would digitize it into AutoCAD and then convert it into ArcInfo Workstation. And it wasn't a couple years later. Within 5 years, we had the birth of ArcGIS Desktop. And once we hit 8.3 is when it really exploded, because that's when it really started to work for everybody. But I so value that old school experience that I had, because I totally understand where all that parcel data came from now. It didn't just magically appear. There were people that for many years digitized with a little engineering scale and little pencil on a Mylar. But I think, as far as what's it moving towards, it's just hard to say. It's exploded into 10,000 pieces. In 2000, if you were really good at writing AML and you could write Avenue and you were a master at Workstation and you understood ArcIMS, you pretty much had it all. You could do it all. And I remember meeting a couple of those guys. And but now it's just exploded into so many different pieces that, most people aren't going to be programmers and project managers. They're going to do one or the other, because it takes such a commitment to learn to do something like be a really good JavaScript programmer or Python programmer. So that's a really tough question. I think you've got to be well-rounded, but there's still plenty of room for specialization.
I agree that, and there's still a lot of value in the traditional GIS experience. here again, one of the interview questions I ask folks, what are the 5 essential elements of a map, right? Very basic. But here again, whether your product is digital or paper, if it looks sloppy and the information is not there, people are just going to disregard it, and that's sad. In terms of the overall trend, it's very interesting. I know our department has had a shift with AGOL coming out and just exploding. We dove in, and now my analysts are the ones actually creating all the web applications. We no longer really do any in-house programming, and so to echo Kent here, I mean it's kind of wherever you want to go. I mean, right now there's a lot of different ways to go. Just finding the right fit in an organization or starting your own thing, but just knowing what you're good at, because you don't want me to try and program. No, if talk about geostatistics and stuff, yeah, I'm right there with you. But programming, no, I'll blow something up or break it.
I think that there's definitely still value in knowing some of the even some of the basic cartography skills. We found, we have folks that, I'm having to go back and forth on looking even at making sure basic map elements are there coming out of school, making sure that the color schemes are not offensive or symbolization are not offensive to demographics or population data. So I think, and I do see some value in I think that there's actually some that we're missing some of that in some of the education now. I think that we're definitely moving towards, the industry is definitely moving more in problem solving. Our customers demand that, our residents, if you work for local government, demand that, the market demands that. It's at your fingertips, and folks expect that we are moving and continuously moving, modernizing our industry.
Yeah, I would agree. There's definitely value in some of the traditional skills, but it's also important to recognize that, some of these traditional areas of expertise, are going to be replaced by machine learning. And I think digitizing is a good example of that. And as Joe said, there's any number of directions you can, any number of paths you can take this career. I mean, I'd say, just 2 examples of that is, computer science or system architecture skills, and then that enables you to create the user experiences and to enable others to leverage GIS, as we've been talking about. And then again, I'll just reemphasize the whole idea of the spatial analytics and, being that person who can, go to a meeting, sit in a room and, recognize a spatial problem and be able to offer a solution.
All right, so we've got a hard stop at 4:25, so I want to leave about 10 minutes for audience questions. Does anybody have questions? If you don't, I'm just going to move forward with the pre-canned questions. So, okay.
I would just like to hear them respond to. So you guys are talking about what a GIS professional is now, what skill sets they need. To me, based on my experience more recently, to be a GIS professional, quote unquote, this is debatable, I guess. You got to have more of an IT background, more of an IT proper background, because to do that level, if you're going to work in an IT department, something can be, it's so integrated, like Ken was saying. There's so many components now it's broken out into. You got to have an understanding of, security certificates, IMS, IIS, those kinds of things. So, GIS professional to a certain degree, maybe more IT oriented from my experience recently. And then you've got the business analysts, and so if we're all data managers, business analysts now are looking at and being expected to use GIS as just another tool. They don't necessarily have to have the formal GIS background, but they need to know about it, know enough to know about it. Like Mike said, go to a meeting and come away from it and know that, hey, just like Excel or PowerPoint or something, I can use this. I can use an ArcGIS online map or a spatial representation of something to make my point to progress the business. So how would you guys respond to that kind of as a different perspective maybe on the
No, I mean, I agree with you, Ray. Yeah, I mean, and the direction this technology is going now, when you look at, the whole Internet of Things and real-time GIS and 3D, I mean, the machine learning, artificial intelligence, I mean, this is going so many different directions that you're right. I mean, those IT skill sets, are pretty critical. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that.
So here again, I know we're a unique kind of department. We're a standalone GIS, and I work with multiple IT departments, which can be interesting in and of itself at times. But I make it a point to sit down with CIOs, to go to lunches with them, to talk with them, invite them to conferences. I'm always in communication with them, because without them, nothing I want to do is ever going to happen or get done, right? And so a lot of those guys, whether they know it or not, are in a way kind of becoming GIS professionals, because we sit down with them. I'll pay for a training and say, hey, I need the DBAs. I want them to sit in on this with us, and then we collaborate. Because in our department, like I said, we focus on special GIS projects, very unique in a lot of ways. And so we do depend on the DBAs and networking, all these other guys. And we'll see something, okay, Esri puts out something, hey, you guys need to update this. Well, lots of times we have to go to our IT group and say, okay, guys, this is what it is. And lots of times we'll literally be sitting next to them as they're pushing the buttons on the computer, and that's okay. We're fine with that. But I agree. And there are those unique situations where I try to let IT do IT and us focus as much as we can. But we still need to have so we still need to have at least some level of understanding of what is happening behind the scenes.
So I'll follow up on that too. Yes, the more we know, the better, right? But I'm not an IT network guru at all. I'm sort of specialized, and I'm pretty good at managing projects and communicating goals, and I'm good at databases and workflow consulting. But I'm not a network engineer. So a good example is when we implement we'll do custom county web applications and all sorts of workflow applications. A lot of times I depend on the county IT, and they've got to make it work on their end, because I can't come in there and say, well, hey, you've got to set up your network this certain way just for this one little application for your GIS department. I generally, and I guess what I'm getting at is it takes a team. You've got to be able to rely on some other people and say, okay, you've hired us to do, XYZ application, and we can do it, and it's written and it's ready to go, and here it is, and works great internally, but now how do we get it to the outside? So a lot of times I'm depending on them to, open the door to the public and to manage their security and so forth. And we obviously can consult and make best practice recommendations. The other thing, it's funny, we talk about GIS. GIS was like our baby for a long time, guys. And it's slipping to the masses. They're all using it now. You'll see, your dad rolling around with the GPS and using little apps and stuff. And, I moderated a session earlier, and they were talking about Buncombe County elections and how they were monitoring the lines at the voting and polling stations and stuff. And it's just the masses are using all that stuff. They don't even know what this GSI stuff is, but they're using it. And so it is still interesting to watch, 20 plus years in now, that it's just blown. I remember in the late 90s, and if I remember right, and somebody can correct me, but the very first online GIS I remember in North Carolina was Ashe County. And I may be wrong, but that was the first one that I saw. And the reason they had a little Ashe County was because Anderson Associates was getting into that IIS or the IMS as a business. And I think they did it either for real cheap or whatever. And I remember seeing it at a property mappers conference, and, sort of like, oh, gee whiz, maps are online. Hey, there's my house, that's cool. And now in a county, when we do upgrades or migrations or something like that, and there's an interruption of service and you got to take it offline, man, the freaking sky's falling. So it's just funny to see how GIS went from sort of this gee whiz, at least, again, in my experience, which is primarily supporting local governments, went from this sort of gee whiz technology, neato, to now, buddy, it's driving everything. And all the different departments, implementing all the different third-party applications that all depend on web services. And man, if that stuff doesn't work, we got a problem. So it's been really interesting to see that transition.
So in your selection process, going through resumes, all that, how much does having some sort of certification, whether it's an Esri technical cert, whether it's a GISP or a Microsoft cert, or whatever it happens to be, play into your process of picking somebody, whether in interviews or resumes or whatnot?
I would definitely value it for sure, right? I'm gonna and some I'll value more than others because some are a lot more difficult to acquire. I think it sort of gets back to the college degree thing. A lot of what a master's degree or something like that tells you is that somebody can stick something out. I mean, so, and I think a lot of that with certifications, it also tells me if you've got Microsoft A+ certification, you've probably been through the ringer and you've done some serious studying, and that tells me a lot. I think you can glean something about their personality from the credentials they have.
Yes. Good value.
Is anybody else dying to answer it? No. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Let's see if that was going to be my next one. Thanks, Trip. I appreciate you. You're a ringer. Let's see. On retention. Okay. Let me see if this thing will play well with me.
Oh, that's okay. Good start.
What is your experience with entry-level employer retention? Do these employees tend to stay within your organization?
Yeah, I think I've been in business for about 12 years, and this was something that we struggled with because particularly any of our entry-level folks tend to come and stay for 1 or 2 years and move on. And, always looking on the horizon. And I just think this is something worthwhile answering. So one of the things that we did was we started a creative team, and that occurs every 2 weeks. Every Friday, I sit down with our creative team and let them dream up and wish anything that they could work on, anything they could do. And that has really, really, really helped with our employee retention because they're engaged in projects that are of interest to them, that they're doing on their own. They're allowed the time to do that. And many things have actually turned into business opportunities for us that have popped up along the way. So it just really gives an outlet, and so I just wanted to share that as an idea that has really helped us, at least with our employee retention.
Great. So
I'll answer that one too. Let me answer that one.
Got 2 minutes.
So again, as a small business, it's a real challenge, and what you want is you don't want people to leave. You're at a point where when you're real small, it's not even worth hiring people if they're going to leave. You just work by yourself and just have a smaller operation. But so we had to we're competing with governments. I'm basically either my employees might leave and go to a government, or I'm going to try to get somebody from government. So I have to have things like 401k. I have to have health insurance. I have to have, bonuses and vacation and flex. And again, one nice thing about being private is I can give the biggest raise I want. I can give big bonuses if things are going really well, and I know good and well governments can't do that, right? Government can't just give somebody, $3,000 extra at Christmas and say Merry Christmas. So, again, working for Highland Mapping's got some benefits. Flex time. And I think another big benefit that you're going to see down the road, and this is something that us private folks can do now that government's going to have a little harder time transitioning to, is letting people work from home, letting people, commute. Like I said earlier, my ACE programmer lives in Greensboro. And, I see him. I hadn't seen him in a few months till just a little while ago. We talk on the phone, we email a lot, but I think that's the new paradigm. One of the project management people I've talked to recently that I may try to steal away from somebody, and I won't tell you who that is, but one of the complaints they had about their current job is they can't work from home at all. And, I'm like, hey, I'll just give you a laptop and a cell phone and we're gone, And again, somebody I've known a long time who's very respected and would be a great employee. So,
Okay, we're going to sneak one last one, and this will be a yes or no. Do you think the GIS community would benefit from a formal apprenticeship program like engineers? Yes or no? Right down the line.
maybe.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
I maybe too. Yeah, it depends on the program. Honestly, how it's set up.
Also, maybe I think that folks would benefit more from a formal kind of mentor network. And I know that like the American Planning Association is doing that now in preparation for your AICP. They're setting up mentors, a formal mentor program.
Well, I'll be different. I'll say no, only because, like I said earlier, people come to this industry from a lot of different backgrounds. And so, I think having that flexibility, to be too rigid, you could be passing up on some really good talent.
All right. Thanks, guys. That was great.